Thanks for joining us today. I'm Aaron Degler, host of My Hometown podcast, also the Mind Body Project podcast. I've been asked by Superintendent Blake Enlow to sit down when our bond for our school bond that was up for vote in November.
Yes, sir.
We sat down and had a virtual town hall meeting where individuals sent in questions via Facebook, email, text to me, and I presented those questions to Mr. Enlow. And we decided to sit down again because the bond is going to be voted on again May 4th.
Yes.
Early voting has already started.
Yes, sir.
So there have been some changes. There's been additional questions with the bond coming up for vote again. So we wanted to kind of go over those. And again, I asked for questions to be sent in to that some of the thoughts and ideas and questions that people had. And again, those were sent in to me via email, Facebook Messenger, text, those different ways, so I could present those to Mr. Enlow and he could clear some of those things up. We're not going to go over the whole scope of the bond again because you can visit our last town hall meeting, which goes over a lot of that, a lot of the nuts and bolts. We're just going to go over some of the things that might have changed a little bit, some of the concerns that maybe some of our community members have going into the new bond coming up on May 4th for the vote, which is early voting has already started.
Mhm.
So we're just going to jump right into it and kind of let you start, Mr. Enlow, with maybe some of the changes, some of the, kind of what's different now than there was in November.
Okay. The first thing I really want to say is I want to encourage everybody to vote. I think that is something that kind of gets lost from time to time in debate back and forth. People on both sides of an issue are very passionate about what they believe and what they understand. And I think it's very important that we in this country take that opportunity to vote. Vote what we believe, vote our conscience, educate ourselves, understand both sides of the issues, and then actually go to the polls and vote. I was fortunate to go do that this morning. And we have those conversations with my kids at my house. And we've gone in the past when I was high school principal and talked to the kids about how important it is to vote. We have that privilege in this country, and that's something that we shouldn't take lightly, and make sure that we go out there and exercise that right. So I've told every group that I've visited with, if you're for the bond, great, vote. If you're against the bond, great, vote. Let's make sure that we get those kind of things out there all the way around. So kind of what has changed, technically nothing changed from the actual scope of the bond project. The facility committee met several times after November and looked at options to take off the different portions of the bond or what could be trimmed, and then presented it back to the board. And the board ultimately decided that due to the fact that the needs were still there, they wanted to roll back out with the same bond package. And so I understand where some folks could say, well, we voted no and then we didn't change anything. I think the biggest part of the bond is the new intermediate school and the junior high renovations, or the intermediate renovations to become the junior high. Mm-hmm. I think that those two things are very closely tied together. And I think so has been some question of, well, the facility committee was really charged with finding a solution to the junior high. The junior high will be 100 years old this year, in 2025. And so that was really the initial charge of the committee, was find a solution for the junior high. And so in that process, they looked at several different options. A basic renovation, and with an additional 8 classrooms, ran about $27 million. And then there were some other options of renovate part of it, demo part of it, add a new wing, build a brand new one. And those different options ranged anywhere from, like I said, $27 million up to $41 million. And so when those numbers got that high,
just for the changes at the junior high,
just for the changes at the junior high, which was our initial charge. And so, and those were all sorts of options. Like I said, renovation with a small addition, keeping the gyms, doing a new junior high with just the gyms, doing a total new build with new gyms, new fine arts center, the whole thing, all those numbers. And that's where they got high. And I understand how folks look at that number and they're like, oh my gosh, that is an enormous amount of money. And it is. But I think the renovation number being $27 million is because if you renovate that building and you open up that building for those changes, all the ADA compliance comes in, square footage requirements from TEA come in, city codes come in. That's why that number gets so high.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in that conversation, the committee said, well, is it a less expensive build to build a elementary type campus, intermediate elementary? And so they went back to the architects and they looked, and it's less expensive to build one of those buildings from the ground up than a junior high. And so I think that's when the conversation shifted to, okay, if we got to deal with the junior high, if we build a less expensive campus to house intermediate age students, the current intermediate was built as a high school in 1965, has most of the amenities that are higher cost things, gym, band hall, science lab, some of that kind of stuff. Did it make more sense to renovate that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the committee came down on the decisions that they made. And so that's why those things are kind of tied together. And one of the challenges also that the intermediate faces is it's 3 separate buildings. And so with the safety concerns and the new safety standards with TEA's put out, making sure that those things, those 3 buildings are all under one roof with a connecting element, that comes through there. And that was part of that. And then really the conversation was, we're going to ask for a lot of money. Is there anything that needs to be addressed at the other 2 campuses?
Mm-hmm.
And so those things, so conversations went, the traffic flow at the elementary has been a challenge for years. And I was before my time of understanding that at the initial build of the high school, there was a field house that came out of the project. And so the weight room piece really was missing.
Mm-hmm.
And so our current facility is what was a maintenance custodial type storeroom, workroom thing. And so it's just undersized. And so one other thing was restroom facility at the baseball field and handicap parking. It's a long walk for folks. And so I think the committee felt adding those things in, if you're asking for that amount of money, would touch every campus.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the thought process on the why. And so when they went back to the board, the option was to cut those other 2 things out. And it was around $4 to $5 million, less than 5% of the total bond. And so it moved it from around 65.8 to about 61.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the discussion there was that doesn't move it enough to make a significant decrease. And so let's go again with it. And that's when they called it at that point. And so I think that's where the discussion came. And I totally understand people having different opinions on both of those, but that's where the decision came from and how they reached it.
Mm-hmm. And so with it coming back out, what was kind of what's the feeling of the board when it comes to, we're going to roll this back out, even though the initial vote was no,
Right.
Back in November.
Right. So the board charged us, the administrators, with gathering feedback after the November election. And so we sent out a survey to the staff and to the parents of the school district, because obviously those are the email addresses and things that we have. And then that feedback came back that 40% of the folks that filled it out didn't vote. So that goes back to the initial conversation of, I want to encourage everybody to vote, both sides. And so that was one of the things. Obviously the needs they felt were still there. The fact that 40% of the people that gave us feedback didn't vote. And then also, I think there was some misunderstanding in the scope in of itself, that there was some thought that the administration building was going to be built in the middle of the intermediate school. And no, that where it says administration on the intermediate school is part of the traffic flow change, building a new principal's office and entryway to flip the front of the building to Houston Street from Mill to help the traffic pick up, drop off, and in and out of the buildings and that kind of thing. So I think that's where some of those kind of things. So I think a little bit of misunderstanding there. There were some folks that said, well, I can't vote. I don't live in the city limits. And so there was some information that, well, I didn't know there was a bond. And so I think the thought was, okay, they said no. The needs are here. The board said, let's go ahead and go out one more time and change our approach to, let's see if we can get some more information to the folks, the right information. And so the questions that came in and the feedback has kind of been what has driven the information pieces that we've sent out. And so hopefully the folks are more educated and understand what's going on with the bond and the projects and those kind of things.
Because there has been a lot of concern about the weight room, about the parking. Some would say that's fluff.
Sure.
But realize what you're saying is for the difference of, yes, it sounds like a lot of money.
Yes.
$5 million.
Yes.
Sounds like a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
But in the big scope of things, it's only less than 5% of the bond. So they're like, let's go ahead and put it in there.
Correct.
Because it's not going to, with taxes and all that, it's not going to make a huge.
It doesn't make
we're
a
talking
huge tax impact.
Dollars.
Yes.
You know, maybe dollars for individuals, not millions of dollars.
Yeah, it was a smaller portion, less than 5%, and I think that's why they came down on it. But I understand folks seeing that, seeing that it being a different piece. It's not specifically a campus that is impacting the students specifically and all students specifically. So I understand that thought process for sure.
And so I think a lot of people would probably agree, however they vote, would agree that we do need some updated things in our schools, new buildings, new classrooms as we grow.
Right.
So the tax, because when the bond was put forth a vote in November, there was still the tax exemption hadn't been voted on yet.
Correct.
So it passed. So how will that change? Now it's a little more certain.
Right.
And I think people's probably big concern is about dollars.
Correct.
It's not necessarily do we need better facilities.
Right,
I think they'd agree, yes.
Yes.
But when it comes to the dollars, how has that changed?
Okay. Yeah. And I've had several conversations. I said, ultimately, this is a tax question. And that's what the vote is are we going to vote yes or are we going to vote no on this tax increase? Because that's exactly what it is. And I know some places they say it's a zero tax increase and all that. I want to be honest and forthright. The taxes have to go up to generate those funds for a school district. We don't have another option. You can cut the budget or you can cut programs or cut things here or there. The majority of our budget goes to personnel costs, and so it would be personnel costs would go down to save those kind of funds. And it'd take a long time to save $65 million, and as we all know, nothing gets any cheaper.
And as we want teachers and staff to be paid more.
Sure. Yeah. And that's one other thing that I think we need to remember too, is that bond money is a one-time occurrance. It's not a recurring fund, and so we can't increase teacher salaries or use those kind of things with bond money. We talked about that a little bit at the last presentation, the difference between maintenance and operation and interest and sinking side of the tax. But back to the original question, we've got a graphic out that talks specifically about the changes in tax rate from 2023 to 2024 to 2025. And the example, it's on our Facebook page, so folks want to go take a look at it, looks at in 2023 what the Bowie ISD tax rate with a $40,000 homestead exemption for a $200,000 home. The tax bill for just the school district was about $1,600 roughly. And so, and in 2024, when we put in, or not we, when they passed the $100,000 homestead exemption, that was applied there, and then the legislature compressed Bowie ISD school taxes 16 cents. So there was a 16-cent decrease plus an additional $100,000 homestead exemption. That same home valued at $200,000. The tax bill in 2024, the estimate is it's about $870. So it's a significant savings. And so we asked for the financial advisor to look at what it would be in 2025 if you add this new bond in, if it was to pass. And so with a $100,000 homestead exemption, on a $200,000 home with the compression that it was at, that goes back up to about $1,200 roughly. So you take a $1,600 bill. We have tax relief significant in the state of Texas, which has been needed all over the place. We all agree with that. And so the question really becomes back, is this a bond that we want to pay that additional change that goes back up to? And so that's where the dollar figures, and those are on our website too. They break them down. You can look at the differences and what it's going to be. And then I think the tax office has what the potentials in 2024 taxes are going to look like, because they're not out yet.
And will that go up? Do the taxes go up each year based on the bond as the interest rate changes on the bond?
No, those are fixed rates on our deal, and they will fluctuate a little bit, but our estimates are based on the one time it'll be the highest, and then it can go there. And that's another question that has been asked, is the projected estimates that we've created on a 4.5% interest rate on the bonds when they sell the bonds. And last week when I spoke to the advisor, they were at 4.25. So there is a little bit of less. It's not significant on that. Most of the time it makes a significant change when it's a whole percentage point. And these are, the bonds are set for call dates. And so that at certain points within the life of the bond, if the bond market was to decrease, you can refinance them and save some of the principal and interest. But if it's above, we're locked in at that rate, whatever they are at the sale date.
And so some have questioned, how long is the bond? You know, is it 40 years? Is it 30 years? Is it?
Our estimate's 26 and a half. The legal, and that comes from the election order. And so in the election order that the attorneys write for us, so that we put out there, and that's what's on the website. Folks can go look at it. It's the estimates, but it also includes the statutory language where it says up to 40 years, and it can change the tax rate and those kind of things. That's the statutory, the legal side that says that the school district's going to pay their bills. Our estimates and what we use based on the financial advisors they gave us is a 26 and a half years at 4.5%. And that includes the current debt that the district has left on the high school bond and then the 2012 bonds too. That all rolls together, and that all is included in that.
In the 27 and a half years, that will all be paid.
That's the plan.
In that time.
26 and a half.
26 and a half.
Yes, sir.
So I want to touch on some other questions. So I'm sure, you know, because the bond, some of the concerns and questions are that this is a special election, so which then has to be funded by the district.
Right.
So has other additional funds been spent on architects and designs, and has a builder been chosen, or is it first pass the bond and then find the builder?
Right. That's how that works. That's how it works. Back when they did the initial work on the bond last time, the board engaged an architect and a construction manager at risk. And so those folks, the architect does their works and then once the bond passes, then they do the additional architect work. So really outside of some basic, they have a publishing side. So they'll create the bond boards that we have in the foyer that have the graphics and those kind of things. So outside of those things, there's not a whole lot of cost associated with the architect. Same thing with the construction manager. The construction manager is basically your general contractor, and then all of the work then goes out to public bid for folks once if the bond was to pass. So there's been no, other than those two folks, the architect and then the construction manager at risk, nobody's been assigned, or none of that work has been.
So once it's passed, then it goes out to
the public bid for anybody can go through that. But it goes through the construction manager. It's kind of like a general contractor. If I had some work done on my house, I'd have a general contractor and I'd pay him, and then they would take.
So it's not the board looking for a contractor; it's through this construction manager.
And the boards went through a process with the architect and had, if I remember right, 6 or 8 different construction managers. They looked at all their qualifications, interviewed a couple of them, talked through the process, and selected one. And so they've just kind of been sitting waiting to see what happens. You know, kind of like the rest of us, kind of saying, wait till May 4th and see kind of what direction and what feedback the community gives us.
And then the cost for the special election comes from the district.
We have got the invoices on those, and I'm going to give rough numbers. I can get the specifics, but I think the Clay County portion was about $1,100. The Jack County portion was about $4,200, and then Monte County was about $3,600, if I can remember all those numbers right off the top of my head. But in that general range is what the election would cost. Plus, there's some legal documents that have to be advertised in the paper, and that's about $1,000 when those things go each time.
And that's just part of the cost of having the election.
Right.
Because again, going back to the board revisiting the bond and deciding there really wasn't a whole lot that could be taken out that would make a significant difference.
Right.
So, and to educate the community more was the choice to spend that additional money because again, I think everybody would agree that there's a need for space and for new buildings and things like that. So it does come down, like you said, to the money issue.
That's exactly what it is.
So hopefully we can clear some of that up if people have questions.
Yeah, hopefully.
One of the questions, it does kind of refer to, it is about students, and I'm just going to read it kind of verbatim so I don't mess it up.
Okay.
But it says talk has been made how the bond will directly correlate to attracting better teachers, better learning environments, thus causing better test scores. As taxpayers, we would be investing in the school by saying yes to the bond. When we go back to money, we pay more. We're investing in our school.
Right.
What is the rate of return on investment of taxpayers? I.e., when we are expected to start attracting better teachers, seeing test scores increase because of new or remodeled facilities.
Right. I think, that's a hard question to know exactly how those things are quantified. I think the number one indicator of a student's achievement increase is the teacher in the classroom. And so I think a newer facility, you can teach a kid in anything. It's the teacher in front of those kids. That's the one that makes the biggest impact. Space-wise impacts it, infrastructure on whether some of the new technology tools work in a building that, was built for that, electrical, all those kind of things. So I think there's some, not confusion, but if some of those things kind of cross over, and so, but I think attracting teachers and attracting the better teachers, when a teacher, and there's a teacher shortage in the state of Texas, and so trying to figure out in ways that you can attract new folks to your community, attract new families, or attract new teachers who are looking for another job. That's one aspect, is what does your facility look like? There are other things too. 4-day work week has been one. There are different things with the teacher incentive allotment. There's all sorts of different things. But a general rule of thumb when you look at change in general is anywhere about 3 years. 3 years is what the research shows that any significant change is going to take place in a school, whether it's school leadership change, whether it's programmatically, whether it's curriculum, whatever, those kind of things. So if I had to stab at an answer there, I would say, it's going to be a little while on those kind of things, because the estimate right now is 18 months to 2 years just to get the project completed if it was to pass. So you're going to probably
then we're looking at 5.
Yeah,
roughly.
Probably by the time all those kind of things take place, 3 to 5 years before you would see that piece be impactful.
And I think it's important to point out that it's a future. We're looking at future growth, future changes that sometimes require pain points now,
right.
Whether it's recruiting better teachers, new buildings, remodeling some of the things, adding.
Right.
So it does take time to see those changes.
Right. And there is a piece of, the enrollment numbers are staying fairly stagnant. And so we did have some real estate folks and some folks in the community that are involved in that side, and they're very, very convinced that growth is coming. And so I think part of the committee's thought process also was, we don't want to keep going back and asking for more bonds. And so that's part of the scope being like it is they don't really want to come back and try to do that again. And it may be that this says the community says no, and then we go a different route and try to figure out what it is we can do with what we have. And that very well could happen.
So, and that was one of the questions. If the bond doesn't pass, then what are the plans for junior high students? How long can they stay in the building for repairs, updates to be made? So, with $27 million to repair,
right?
What do we do?
That would be. There would be a discussion at some point, I think, down the road. Is what do we change in the bond? Is it to go back to something like that? Do we cut it down to what just the renovating the junior high would be? I think we continue. We're going to still have school. It's still going to operate. Still going to go. It was very similar to when several years ago the hospital closed. The city still functioned. We're still going to function as a school district. I think some of those challenges we'll just maintain. We'll just maintain there and see if there are any options. At that, I think there's no real hard and fast. Well, my gosh, if it doesn't go, we're going to stop having school. And I know that's an extreme thing. Nobody's saying that, but I think the specifics would be we'd have to circle back and go, okay, we tried this. The community said no. what are some viable options that are less expensive. There are things, there's not a lot of room in the budget to cut things out, so it would take a little while to save money or do some of that kind of thing. There would be some cuts and some options that we'd have to look at that way.
And it may still be coming back to another bond
eventually
at a lower cost, but again, that one may pass a lower amount. Then there still is going to be needs.
Yeah, the needs are still going to be there. The needs won't go away. I think at that point the plan would be to continue to gather feedback.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people with good ideas, and different thought processes, and so it may be that we do a more fact-finding information and start trying to be creative with some different ideas that we need to look at.
Mm-hmm.
That the committee looked at all sorts of things, and that was the project that in the proposal that they settled on now, and so that's the one they're going with. That's not to say there's not something that could be adjusted or whatever down the road. I think that'd be a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think 2 shots at it and see what the community says, and then done our part to try to inform. But I think they have a voice in what happens.
And again, the committee that reviewed all this is made up of
community members, parents, business owners. There were a few teachers, administrators, board member.
So I think it's important to point out that it's a cross section of our community.
Yeah, it was 18 folks when it started, and unfortunately, we've had some that have dropped off over the last year and a half, and so the numbers come down. But it has been a cross section. It's business owners, it's parents, real estate agents, bank. I'm trying to think, small business owners, entrepreneurs, teachers, all those kind of things. Representatives, parents,
to get the best input to cover the majority of our community, whether
and folks that have different circles of influence around the town.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a lot of the conversation was. Okay, go back and talk to your folks and get feedback from them, and let them tell us what they think or ideas that they have or approaches that we may want to take.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny. You go through that and people are like, "Oh, knock it down," renovate it. It's all over the place. All the different ideas that people have, and trying to maintain something that's palatable to everybody.
Mm-hmm. And so when it came time to resubmit the bond for election, was that up to that committee, or was it up to the board to receive feedback from the committee?
Yes.
And then make that decision based on the feedback from the committee?
Right. The committee went to the board and said, there's the 2 options. You can take these 2 things out. And through the conversation, they said, no, I think we want to go back with that. So the committee had feedback on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it like it is. Take those other 2. Take the weight room, restroom off, and then cut the parking number down. It wasn't to get rid of it at the elementary, but it was to reduce it. And so, but that was the board's decision, and the motion was made to put it back as it was.
Mm-hmm. And then one other question, and you're probably going to understand this way better than I do. But which fiscal agents Bowie ISD spends $486,708 a year on?
Okay, that is part of our line item budget. And so our budget's on our website, and so I know folks are taking a look at information. And so one of the lines in our budget says fiscal agent, and I think it's important for folks to understand we are part of the Montague County Special Ed Cooperative. Now, the 7 school districts in Montague County function as a shared services agreement to provide special education services to the students of Bowie ISD. And so when it says fiscal agent, that's our payment to the co-op for special ed services. And so that's where that goes. So I can understand where folks are like, what is that? Is that part of this or that kind of thing? It's totally separate. All 7 school districts participate in the co-op. The co-op functions and provides those services to the school districts based on the percentage of students that are enrolled in special ed in the district. And so that's what that number is. That's our yearly payment for special ed services to the co-op.
To get those services, for the school.
Yes, sir.
I just want to look over and make sure. One of the questions was, why not build a new junior high and leave the intermediate as is?
Right.
I think you kind of alluded that before. There was, I think, or I'll let you know.
Yeah, I think that was the initial conversation. Was we looked at that and thought, okay, and they looked at the numbers and said it's 27 to 41 million to make that project work. And so, what do we do if we're going to ask for this amount of money? Do we want to ask for some more and try to get a bigger bang for the buck? Get 2 campuses renovated, a new one and a renovated one, versus just one at that number, and then knowing that eventually that the intermediate campus built in '65. It would have been our next oldest building. That's some of the challenges that building would have faced down the road. And so I think that's because they're tied together was the decision that the facility committee came up with, and that's why they made the decision that they did.
And why not build a new junior high? Because too, I think we can't really take down that. We can't tear down the old junior high,
right?
Because of community sentiment
right
about it.
Right. It's a great building. It's cool. Yeah. It's got the auditorium, and I think that's one other thing that folks have asked about, if it's good enough to go with put DAP and ALA in there in our administrative offices. If those are good enough to go, why can't we just do the other? I think that's a significant number change. Right now, there's 375, 400 kids running in through that building right now. The maintenance and wear and tear with that many kids in the building versus putting 8 to 10 admin office folks over there, and then maybe 15 to 20 kids in DAP and ALA greatly reduces the number of folks in the building and the space that's being used. It also allows for the auditorium to continue to be used for community events, different things. Periodically, folks rent it out and use it, and so that will still be able to be maintained and used, and it gives a little bit of flexibility, and it maintains the beauty and the structure of the building.
And so with those because when you put that few people in that building, what will be done with the extra space, extra classrooms, offices?
Some of it will be closed off, initially. I think it gives some flexibility down the road. I think the portables will go away, some of that kind of thing. There'll be a second band hall that'll still be there that could be used for some different options. I think it gives us flexibility looking forward in growth in career technology education. That cafeteria there has a commercial kitchen. And so if our culinary program continues to grow, I think there's some partnership opportunities at NCTC where a culinary program could grow. There's some different, obviously the board spent some grant funds to do the auto tech back at the old bus barn, and so that'll still continue to be used. So I think it creates a little bit of flexibility. And then the gyms will still be there, so there'll be additional gyms for the community to use and that kind of thing.
So it does help with community involvement too, the things that the community can use.
Right. They'll still be
things
there.
Like that.
Yeah, I think the maintenance will go down a little bit and maintain just because of the daily wear and tear based on the number of folks using the facility will be less.
I think we covered all the questions that I had. There is a town hall meeting coming up this week on Thursday.
No, it's tomorrow. It's Wednesday.
Just tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. Wednesday, we'll have a town hall here at the administration office at noon, and then another one at 5:30 at the junior high auditorium. And so we'll go over kind of like what we did here. We'll go over the scope and got some slides and some different information to share, and then see if there's any questions. And we've done a good job here, and I think there's folks that can watch this and answer questions or come with questions, and we'll see what happens.
And this will be out. We're doing this on Tuesday afternoon.
Okay.
This will be out Tuesday evening, so people can watch it. They can hopefully come. If we didn't cover some questions, they can come with those questions.
Right.
I highly encourage the community, as Mr. Enlow said, vote your voice, whether yes or no.
Correct.
We have that option, and we need to take advantage of that option.
Right.
But we need to vote an educated vote.
Right.
That means finding out the information. And sometimes it's best to find out the information from the source.
Sure.
As we've discussed many times in our talks and our interviews, I've come to you many times with concerns straight to you to get those worked out. So highly encourage the community, if you still have questions after this, after all of the information facts that the school has put out, then come to a meeting. Ask those questions in person. Because I think that if you have a one-on-one conversation, it is so much different,
right,
than even an email or a text.
Right.
And I know you've had multiple emails from community members that have asked questions, and you've given those answers.
Right.
And that's still an option.
Absolutely.
If you have questions, email Mr. Enlow and find out what the answers are.
Right. Yeah, we'd be glad. And people, I get stopped all the time. What about this? What about, different places, and I know some people, they're like, oh, I don't want to bother. I'm okay with, answering questions and things. That's what I'm here at. I've been principal of 3 different places. I've tried to answer lots of questions all the time. So I just want to be honest and upfront and give people the answers to the questions if I can answer them. Some things I don't know the answer, and I said, let me find out and I'll get back to you.
And I want to also say that, people might have an idea of, well, the school's trying to slide some things under. And I want to encourage that Mr. Enlow is part of our community.
Right.
He doesn't live in a different community and commutes to our community.
Right.
He lives here. Like he said, he goes to church with the people. He sees the people.
Right.
So whatever decision is made, yes or no, you too live with that decision.
Absolutely impacts my
comes
tax.
out of your pocket.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, impacts my taxes. My kids go to school here. At this point, they'll be through those buildings. And my wife teaches here and those kind of things. So, yeah, I have a vested interest in what happens here and want to make sure that it's a good place for kids.
So thank you, Mr. Enlow, for sitting down and chatting with me, answering those questions. Again, we just encourage people to be informed. Come to a town hall meeting here tomorrow, Wednesday at noon.
Yes, sir.
And then at the junior high tomorrow evening, Wednesday at 5:30.
That's right.
Come with your questions. Come prepared to ask and get the answers. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Mr. Enlow, for giving me the time and sharing a little insight into the bond. And election is May 4th, and early voting has already started, so you can go do that. But hopefully you might hold off to hear this and go to a town hall meeting if you have any questions, because it may change your mind, because information sometimes does that. Yes or no, it can change your mind.
Absolutely.
So thank you, and thank you to each of you for joining me today. And please always be informed and vote your voice. Thank you.